welcome to this lesson on how to create walking bass lines. You'll find this useful if you're a beginner bassist struggling to figure out what notes to play in your lines, or if you're a jazz musician that plays other instruments and would like to incorporate walking bass lines into your arrangement. The 3 simple principles we'll cover in this lesson all relate to note choices for walking bass lines. If you learn them and apply them, you're going to have a much easier time improvising walking bass lines. You won't repeat yourself as much, and you'll have a lot more control over what you're able to play. So what is a walking bass line for those who aren't familiar? Well, it's primarily a quarter note line with some rhythmic embellishments that's usually used in jazz and swing music. It's quite unique compared to bass lines in other genres because of how melodically independent it is and the fact that it doesn't repeat itself. So why is it that beginner bass players have so much trouble creating a walking bass line? It might be because walking bass lines have less in common with this and more in common with this. Like I mentioned earlier, the walking bass line is a melodic counterpoint. Thus, it doesn't really repeat much and requires the improviser to know quite a bit about music theory, chords, scales, etc. All while being aware of what the notes are on their instrument. You can't just rely on physical shapes. Well, in this lesson, I'm going to have things organized according to 3 simple principles. If you follow these, it'll set a great foundation for choosing your notes in walking bass lines. The 3 principles are knowing the harmony, knowing the connecting notes, and knowing good melodic shapes. The first principle, knowing the harmony, is possibly the most abstract of the 3. It's also the one that might require the most homework. So what do I mean by this, understanding the harmony? Long story short, it means you need to know this, 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 and this. Here's what all of this looks like with C as the root note. If that's new to you, I would recommend first learning that in all 12 keys. Most is pretty self-explanatory, but what about the last part, the idea that chords imply a tonality or scale? Well, the basic concept is this. In any songbook standard we play, the chords that are there, and often groups of chords, represent a certain key center. Like in classical music, those key centers are either a major scale or a combination of minor scales, like the harmonic minor and melodic minor scales. Quickly recognizing what key center a group of chords represent really simplifies the process. It allows you to know which scale you'll be using for your bass line, and allows your ear to be sort of in tune with whatever the tonic is at a given point in a tune. Here's a bunch of commonly used harmonic devices you'll see in jazz standards. You'll notice with all of these, I'm highlighting the key centers within the chord progression. You'll see, especially when we get to principle 3 on melodic shapes, this becomes incredibly important to guide our walking line, especially when we choose any stepwise motion in it. Try to go through a few jazz standards you're already familiar with and harmonically analyze them this way. Look for the key centers that are present within the tunes. A lot of times, 2-5-1 progressions are indicative of this. You could think of connecting notes as a sort of bridge, something that safely gets us from one chord to another. And in the case of our walking bass line, it's something that sets up a resolution to a root. If we're playing a half note based 2 feel, that would mean the half note that you play for beats 3 and 4. If we're playing a quarter note bass line where we play 4 quarter notes in a measure, that would mean the 4th quarter note, beat 4. And it's pretty simple, the rules we have with these connecting notes. There's 3 types of connecting notes we can use. These are stepwise diatonic, stepwise chromatic, and perfect 4th up or perfect 5th down. With all of these, the nomenclature refers to the relationship between the connecting note and the root that it's resolving to. The only exception is that little term diatonic on diatonic stepwise connecting notes. The diatonic there refers to the first chord we're on. It basically means, is the connecting note we're using part of the key we're in? Let's look at an example. How about something super common like a 2-5 progression in C major? So D minor 7 and G dominant 7. Let's go through each of these and figure out what the connecting notes would be. We'll set up a really simple template of just half notes because it eliminates what we really have to think about. We start on our root D, Then we play our connecting note, and then we land on G. The only decision making involved then is what the connecting note will be and what octave we choose to play in. So stepwise diatonic. First of all, how do we figure out what the term stepwise means? Well, this is in relation to the root we're trying to get to, the G. So get your mind centered on the note G, and basically the term stepwise means anything next to it in the musical alphabet. So in that case, that would mean some kind of F and some kind of A. The term diatonic will give us a hint as to what kind of F or A. What I mean is it an F natural, an F sharp, an A natural, an A flat? Well, again, diatonic. So if you remember from our principle knowing the harmony, that would mean knowing what the underlying key center is. This 2-5 progression is in C major, right? C major has no flats or sharps, so therefore F and A are both diatonic stepwise connecting notes. Okay, great. What about our second kind of connecting note, the stepwise chromatic connecting note? Well, again, we would find our stepwise motion, which is again the notes F leading to G and the notes A leading to G, but we would need to make sure that they're half steps, that they resolve chromatically. And in that case, that would mean the notes F sharp and the notes A flat. Now you'll notice right away that those notes are non-diatonic, meaning they're not within the key of C major. The note F sharp and the note A flat are not in the C major scale. But the half-step resolution is such a powerful thing that it actually doesn't matter that they're not part of the key, the resolution still sounds good. And our last type of connecting note is this perfect fourth below or perfect fifth above, which ends up being the same note. It's one category. So what would that be in relation to the note G that we're trying to resolve to? Right, it would be the note D. D is a perfect fourth below G, and it's also a perfect fifth above G. Here's me playing a full version of this concept on a 2-5-1 progression. You'll see me playing all the different connecting note resolutions, the ones that go from D minor 7 to G7, as well as the ones that go from G7 to C major. We'll still be using only half notes, but you'll see when we get to principle 3, melodic shape, we'll be ready to use quarter notes. All right, great. We're already on principle 3, choosing good melodic shape. Once you learn this one, you're going to be ready to improvise your own walking bass lines. This is the point at which things will really start to take shape. We'll start working with quarter notes. So we have 3 different melodic shapes to choose from. These are stepwise up or down, arpeggio up or down, and root 5th octave motion up or down. Knowing what melodic shape we choose will do a lot of the work for us. It'll basically outline the first 3 quarter notes we play in a measure. So let's stick with that 2-5 progression in C major, D minor 7, and G7. What if we want to do stepwise motion up on a D minor 7 chord? Well, basically we just go up the musical alphabet in order, staying within the key. Remember, we're in the key of C major, so that would be D, E, F. And now for that 4th note, we would choose one of our connecting notes from our second principle. What were those connecting notes? Do you remember? They were F, A, F sharp, A flat, and D. So we could choose from any of them. Actually, one exception, we wouldn't choose the note F because we would end up repeating it. Listen to what that sounds like. It sounds a little funny. In general, we try to avoid that, playing the same note twice in a row, though there are some exceptions. How about stepwise down? Well, again, we would simply follow the C major scale, going down from the note D. So D, C, B, and again, for that 4th note, we would have our choice of our connecting notes. The same principle applies for all these melodic shapes. So our first 3 notes get outlined for us. If we choose the arpeggio shape, that would be D, F, A, and then we choose one of our connecting notes. If we do the root 5th octave shape, we get D, A, D, and then we choose one of our connecting notes. We can also do a broken arpeggio where we go D, A, F, like we jump to the 5th before we play the 3rd. Again, the 4th note would be our connecting note. I'll now play a simple exercise demonstrating the different melodic shapes and the variations you can do with them by using different connecting notes. You'll see that even a simple 2-chord relationship where we're only resolving from root to root, we have 20 plus options. I don't even play all the options in this example, but I play a lot of them. Try to memorize these patterns and implement them into your playing, especially the ones that maybe don't come natural to you. The whole idea is to get out of the habit of playing physical patterns that we get reliant on and use our ear to really compose our bass line. All right, let's do a quick review of our 3 principles. Remember, principle 1 was knowing the harmony, which meant not only knowing the chord tones in the chord progression, but also knowing the underlying key center and scale you'll use to determine the notes in your bass line. The second principle was knowing our connecting note options, which are basically our setup notes. They're something we play to create a pleasing resolution to a downbeat on a root. So in a 2 feel, that would be the second half note we play that sets up a resolution. And in a 4/4 walking line, that would be the 4th beat. And our third and last principle was that of good melodic shape. We went over the kinds of melodic shapes that make your line sound pleasing melodically and also clear for the other musicians, which were things like scalar motion and arpeggio motion. Choosing our melodic shape does a lot of the work for us. It basically chooses 3 out of the 4 notes in a measure of 4/4. For the 4th note, we basically choose our connecting note. Let's look at a simple example applying all 3 of these principles on the first 8 measures of the chord progression to Autumn Leaves. Here's a few other things to consider and maybe even exceptions from what we talked about today. Chromatic notes can sometimes be used earlier in a bass line, particularly in 4th bass movement between chords that have major thirds. So very simply, that could be something like C7 moving to F7. We can play a phrase where we add a half step earlier and play an E flat on beat 3. This kind of sequence is pretty common, and I'm sure you've heard this before. It doesn't quite fit our rules, so I figured I'd include it as an example to memorize. Another thing we didn't talk about today is playing a phrase on a chord that lasts more than 1 measure. Suffice to say, a lot of the same rules apply, but I'll give you one little tip that might help you a lot. If, say, you're supposed to be on a chord for 2 measures, either aim for the root on the downbeat or the 5th on the downbeat in the 2nd measure. And basically for the root, that would mean you would play an arpeggio shape in the 1st measure, either up or down. And if you were to aim for the 5th, that would mean you would play a scalar passage up or down. And that leads us to the 3rd consideration we should make, and that's that we mainly covered how to resolve to roots on downbeats and bass lines. We didn't talk about other chord tones. It is possible to land on things like thirds on downbeats, but it's a little more advanced, and I'm planning on saving that topic for another video. There's of course things like fills and rhythmic variations to consider as well. Those are things that we can cover in later lessons down the road. As for now, practice these concepts and make sure to subscribe to my email list. You'll get a free PDF of this lesson. If you're interested in learning even more, I do offer one-on-one video lessons for both upright and electric bass. You can reach out to me at my email, jeff@jeffdingler.com. I'll include that link in the description. Thanks once again for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.